Stop scrolling. I need to tell you something that sounds impossible, but is absolutely true. An 8-year-old boy had never spoken a word in his entire life. His billionaire mother spent £15 million on doctors, specialists, therapists. Every single one said the same thing. We can't help him. Then one afternoon, a homeless 11-year-old girl climbed through a gap in their fence. She gave him something to drink from a small clay jar. His mother screamed, thinking he'd been poisoned. But 30 minutes later, that boy spoke his first word. Not because of science, not because of money, because of ancient medicine carried by a child who had nothing. This is their story. And I promise you, it will change how you think about healing, hope, and what's really possible. Stay with me. Welcome to Radiant Story and Tales. While you are here, I want you to click the subscribe button, like and share, so that we can keep bringing you more interesting stories. Let me tell you about a boy who lived in silence. Not the peaceful kind of silence, but the lonely kind, the kind that builds walls around your heart. His name was Daniel, and for 8 long years, he had never spoken a single word. Not one, not even a whisper. Daniel's mother, Catherine, was one of the most powerful women in London. She owned technology companies, sat on boards, made decisions that affected thousands of people. Forbes magazine wrote articles about her success. Business journals called her brilliant. But all her power, all her money, couldn't solve the one problem that truly mattered to her. Her son couldn't speak. It wasn't that Daniel couldn't physically talk. The doctors had checked everything. His vocal cords were perfect. His brain scans showed nothing wrong. Every specialist in London, Paris, New York, they all said the same thing. Mrs. Parker, there's no medical reason he can't speak. But medical reasons in real life are sometimes two different things, aren't they? Catherine had spent nearly £15 million trying to unlock her son's voice. Speech therapists came to their mansion 3 times a week. Neurologists flew in from Switzerland. Alternative healers from India. Sound therapy experts from California. Hypnotherapists, acupuncturists. Every expert money could buy walked through their door. Nothing worked. Daniel communicated through an expensive tablet his mother bought him. He'd type out what he wanted to say, show it to people, watch their faces as they read his words instead of hearing them. It worked, but it wasn't the same. It would never be the same. Their home was a beautiful prison. That's the only way to describe it. A massive estate in the wealthy part of London, surrounded by high walls and security cameras. Guards patrolled the grounds. Staff members moved quietly through the halls. Everything was perfect, controlled, safe, and completely empty. Daniel spent most of his days alone. His mother worked constantly, building her empire, making her deals. The staff were kind but distant. And Daniel was a silent boy who lived in the big house. That's how everyone saw him. Not as a person with thoughts and feelings and dreams. Just as the problem that needed fixing. Every morning was the same. Wake up in his enormous bedroom. Get dressed in expensive clothes. Eat breakfast at one end of a table that could seat 20 people while his mother sat at the other end, typing on her phone. Then tutors would come and therapists, and a day would pass in scheduled blocks of time. But there was one place Daniel loved. One spot where he felt almost free. The garden. Behind the mansion, there was an old willow tree. Its branches hung down like curtains, creating a hidden space underneath. Daniel would sit there for hours, feeling the grass beneath him, watching the leaves move in the wind, listen to birds sing songs he could never sing himself. It was under that tree where Daniel felt most alone, but also most honest. He didn't have to pretend there. Didn't have to try to speak for therapists who looked at him with encouraging smiles that couldn't hide their frustration. Didn't have to see his mother's face, trying so hard to hide her disappointment. He could just be silent and sad and small. Catherine watched him sometimes from her office window. She'd see her son sitting under that willow tree, and her heart would break a little more each time. She'd built an empire, commanded boardrooms, negotiated deals worth millions. But she couldn't help her own child. The irony ate at her. She could solve any business problem. But this was beyond her. So she threw more money at it, more specialists, more therapies, more everything. because that's what she knew how to do. When something doesn't work, you try harder, spend more, push further. But you can't buy everything with money. Some problems don't care how rich you are. Daniel knew this. Even at 8 years old, he understood something his mother didn't. The doctors weren't wrong when they said nothing was physically broken, but they weren't completely right either. Something was locked inside him. He could feel it sometimes, like a door that wouldn't open, like words trapped behind glass. He'd try to speak, try so hard his throat would ache, but nothing would come out. Just silence. Always silence. And the worst part? No one really listened to him, anyway. They listened to his mother talking about him. They listened to test results and therapy reports. But Daniel himself? The actual boy with actual feelings? No one really heard him. That's the thing about being voiceless. It's not just about sound. It's about being invisible, being overlooked, being the problem in the room instead of the person. Daniel had learned to accept it. This was his life. Silence and loneliness in a big empty house with walls so high he couldn't see beyond them. He didn't know that everything was about to change. He didn't know that on one particularly hot summer afternoon, a gap in the fence he'd never noticed would let someone into his life who would see him in a way no one else had. He didn't know that a girl with muddy shoes and a canvas bag full of herbs would do what 15 million pounds couldn't do. He didn't know that his voice was waiting, not broken, just sleeping, waiting for the right person to help him wake it up. All Daniel knew, sitting under his willow tree that afternoon, was that he was tired. Tired of trying, tired of failing, tired of being the silent boy in the big house. He closed his eyes and leaned back against the tree trunk, feeling the summer heat pressing down on him. And he had no idea that in just a few hours he would speak his first word. Her name was Lily, and she talked to herself because there was no one else to listen. "Okay, think," she muttered, crouching behind a wall on a street where she definitely didn't belong. "Mrs. Patterson needs more of that lavender oil. Mr. Singh wanted the ginger mixture. And that lady with the headaches, she needs feverfew." Right, feverfew. Lily was 11 years old, though she looked younger, small and thin. With dark hair, she kept in a braid that was always coming undone. Her clothes were clean but worn, washed so many times the colors had faded to almost nothing. Her shoes had holes in them, covered with tape that was peeling at the edges. But her eyes were sharp, always watching, always learning. Lily lived on the streets of London, had been for almost 2 years now, ever since her grandmother died. Her grandmother, Grace, had raised her, taught her everything. How to identify healing plants growing in abandoned lots. How to make remedies from roots and flowers. How to help people when they couldn't afford doctors. This knowledge is older than any hospital, Grace used to say, her weathered hands crushing herbs at their tiny kitchen table. Your great-great-grandmother knew this. Her mother before her. Don't let it die. When Grace passed away, the authorities tried to put Lily in a group home. She lasted 3 months before running away. She couldn't stay in a place where they threw away her grandmother's notebooks, the ones with all the recipes written in faded ink. Living on the streets was hard. Cold in winter, hot in summer, always uncertain. But Lily survived. She sold her remedies to people who needed them, immigrants who couldn't afford clinics, elderly folks on fixed incomes, workers who couldn't miss a day of work for a cold. She kept moving, stayed invisible, took care of herself the way Grace had taught her. Today, she wandered farther than usual, looking for fresh mint. The patch she normally used had been destroyed by construction, so she'd walked north, into neighborhoods where people like her didn't belong, past the nice houses with perfect gardens, past the buildings with doormen who looked at her like dirt, all the way to where the houses became estates and the streets became private. That's when she saw the wall. It stretched along an entire block, 3 meters high, brick and iron, topped with cameras and sensors. Lily had seen wealthy houses before, but this was different. This was a fortress. She followed the wall, curious. What kind of person needed this much security? Near the corner, she found it, a gap where the bricks had shifted, barely wide enough for a cat, or a very small, very thin girl. Lily looked around. The street was empty. The summer heat kept people indoors. She shouldn't do this. It was trespassing. If she got caught, they'd send her back to the system for sure. But she'd always been curious. And the gap seemed almost like an invitation. She dropped to her knees and squeezed through. The bricks scraped her arms, caught her bag, held her for a terrifying moment when she thought she'd be stuck forever. Then she twisted. Something tore, and she tumbled through onto soft grass. The garden was like a dream. Lily had grown up around concrete and chain-link fences. Her grandmother's garden had been tomatoes in pots on their balcony. But this was acres of green, flowers in perfect rows, trees that looked ancient, a fountain bubbling somewhere nearby, and herbs. Someone had planted an actual herb garden along the eastern wall. Rosemary, basil, thyme, and their growing so thick it needed thinning was the mint she'd been searching for. Lily moved quickly, pulling out her small scissors. Grace had taught her to never take more than a third of any plant. Take what you need, leave what it needs, she'd always said. She was cutting her third stem when she heard a sound. Not quite a gasp, not quite a cry, something in between. She spun around. A boy was sitting under a willow tree about 6 meters away, maybe 7 or 8 years old. He was staring at her with wide eyes, his mouth slightly open, completely frozen. Lily's first thought was to run, but something stopped her. The way the boy looked, not scared exactly, more surprised. And there was something else in his face, something she recognized because she'd seen it in her own reflection. Loneliness. "Hey," she said carefully, keeping her voice soft. "I'm not going to hurt you. I was just taking some mint. I'll leave now." The boy didn't move, didn't speak, just stared. Lily took a step toward the gap in the fence. "Look, I'm sorry I came in. I didn't mean to scare you." Still nothing. No words, no movement. Something wasn't right. Normal kids would yell for help or run away. But this boy just sat there, staring at her like he didn't know what to do. "Are you okay?" Lily asked, taking a careful step closer. The boy blinked. His hands moved, and Lily saw he was holding a tablet. His fingers flew across the screen. Then he turned around. "Who are you?" Lily's breath caught. He wasn't talking. He was typing. "I'm Lily," she said slowly. "I was just passing through." The boy typed again. "Are you real?" The question hit her hard. This kid, in this paradise of a garden, in what had to be a mansion worth millions, was asking if she was real. Like he didn't see people very often. Like he'd been alone so long, he wasn't sure what was real anymore. Lily sat down in the grass, keeping her distance but close enough to talk. "Yeah," she said softly. "I'm real. Are you?" For the first time, the boy's face changed. Just the slightest hint of a smile. And Lily realized that her afternoon had just gotten very complicated. They sat together in that garden for almost an hour, and Lily learned his story. His name was Daniel. He lived in the mansion. He'd never spoken, not once in his entire life. Doctors said there was nothing wrong with him, but the words just wouldn't come. Daniel learned about Lily, too, about her grandmother, about the remedies, about living on the streets. And somehow, talking to this boy who couldn't talk back, Lily found herself being more honest than she'd been in months. "I should go," she finally said as the sun started sinking lower. "Before someone sees me." Daniel typed quickly. "Will you come back?" Lily hesitated. Coming back was risky, but the desperate hope in his eyes was hard to resist. "Maybe," she said, "if I can." She did come back. The next day and the day after that. Each time, she'd slip through that gap in the fence, and Daniel would be waiting under the willow tree. They became friends in that secret way that only happens when two lonely people find each other. Then came the day that changed everything. It was brutally hot, the kind of heat that makes the air shimmer and your head feel light. Daniel had been in the garden too long, but he didn't want to go inside. Inside was empty. Out here, he could wait for Lily. But the heat was winning. Daniel felt dizzy. His mouth was so dry. When he tried to stand, the world tilted sideways. He stumbled, caught himself, stumbled again, The house seemed a million miles away. He could see staff moving inside, but they weren't looking out. They didn't know he needed help, and he couldn't call to them, couldn't scream, couldn't make a single sound. Daniel sank to his knees in the grass. His vision was darkening at the edges. His heart hammered too fast. He was going to pass out right here, and no one would know until it was too late, because he couldn't speak. Because 7 years of silence meant no one would hear him dying just meters from his own house. That's when Lily found him. She'd come back for lavender, but when she tumbled through the gap, she saw him collapse in the grass, and she ran. Hey! Hey, can you hear me? She dropped beside him, her hands shaking as she checked his breathing. His face was flushed red, his skin dry and burning hot. Heat exhaustion, maybe heat stroke. Lily yanked off her backpack and grabbed her water bottle. She lifted his head gently and helped him drink. Come on, she whispered. Stay with me? Daniel's eyes fluttered open. He was looking at her, trying to focus. She managed to drag him into the shade of the willow tree, her small arms trembling with effort. She poured water on her hands and pressed him to his forehead, his cheeks, the back of his neck. What were you thinking? She muttered. Staying out here in this heat? Daniel's color was improving, but he was still in bad shape. And that's when Lily remembered what was in her bag. Her hand closed around a small ceramic vial, sealed with wax. The remedy her grandmother had called the awakener. Grace had used it for people whose bodies had shut down, not physically broken, but locked, systems that had gone dormant and forgotten how to work. Lily broke the seal and looked at Daniel seriously. This is going to taste terrible, she warned, but it might help. My grandmother used it for people whose bodies had forgotten how to work properly. She paused, choosing her words carefully. I think maybe your voice isn't broken, Daniel. I think maybe it's just been asleep, and this might wake it up. It was a crazy idea. Heat exhaustion and muteness weren't the same thing. But Grace had always said the body was connected in ways doctors didn't understand. That trauma could lock things down, and the right remedy could unlock them. Daniel stared at the vial. Lily could see the war in his eyes. Fear versus hope versus desperate need to try anything. Slowly, he reached for the vial. I don't know if this will work, Lily said honestly. But what do you have to lose? Daniel closed his eyes and drank. His whole body jerked. The vial dropped from his hands. His eyes flew open wide, his face contorting in shock, not pain, but something like touching electricity. Daniel. Lily grabbed his shoulders. Are you okay? Daniel couldn't answer. His mouth was open, but no sound came. His hands went to his throat, his eyes wide with alarm and confusion, and something that looked like wonder. Then he gasped, a real, audible gasp. Sound where there had never been sound before. Oh my God, Lily breathed. It's working. Over the next 30 minutes, they sat together under the willow tree, watching the medicine work. Daniel kept opening and closing his mouth, feeling his throat, testing sensations he'd never felt before. The feeling should get stronger, Lily explained, remembering her grandmother's teachings. It has to work through your whole system. You might feel weird, tingly warm. That's normal. That's it working. Finally, Daniel tried. He drew in a deep breath, concentrated, and pushed. Nothing came out. Just air. Just silence. His face crumpled with devastation. No, wait, Lily said quickly. That's normal. The pathways are open, but they're rusty. You have to practice. Try again. Daniel tried again. This time, a sound came out. Rough, scratchy, barely recognizable as anything, but it was sound. Real, actual, impossible sound. Daniel's eyes went wide. His hand flew to his throat. Yes. Lily grabbed his shoulders. That was you. That was your voice. They practiced for 10 more minutes, each sound getting clearer, each attempt bringing him closer to actual words. And then they heard voices. Daniel's mother had come home early, and she'd seen them in the garden. Catherine Parker's car came through the gates like a storm. She'd left work early, driven by instinct. Mother's intuition that something was wrong. And now, standing beside her car, staring across the lawn at her son sitting with a strange, disheveled girl, She knew that instinct had been right. Security. Her voice cut across the garden like a knife. Code yellow. East Garden. Now! She was already moving, striding across the lawn, every protective instinct screaming danger. Her son, who couldn't call for help, alone with a stranger who'd somehow breached their security. As she got closer, she could see details. The girl was young, maybe 11, with clothes that had seen better years and a large backpack. Daniel was sitting against a tree, and something about him looked different. More alert, more alive, but that didn't matter. What mattered was that a stranger had gotten to her son. Daniel. Catherine dropped to her knees beside him, her hands checking him over frantically. Are you hurt? Did she hurt you? Look at me. He's fine, the girl said. I didn't hurt him. He had heat exhaustion. He was collapsed, and I helped him. You what? Catherine's voice was dangerous now. Her security chief arrived with 2 guards, forming a perimeter. Then Catherine saw it. A small ceramic vial on the grass, empty, with dark residue still clinging to its sides. Her blood ran cold. She snatched it up. What is this? What did you give my son? Medicine, the girl said, lifting her chin defiantly. He needed it. Medicine? Catherine's voice rose. You're a child. You don't have medicine. You have... She looked at the residue, her mind jumping to the worst conclusions. Security! Call an ambulance. Possible poisoning. We need his stomach pumped immediately. No, the girl shouted. It's not poison. It's a traditional remedy my grandmother taught me. It's just herbs. I don't care what your grandmother taught you. You gave my son an unknown substance without permission, without medical oversight. Do you understand how dangerous that is? Catherine turned to her security chief. Detain her. When the police arrive, I want her arrested. And then Daniel made a sound. It wasn't loud. It wasn't clear. It was barely more than a rough exhalation. But it was sound, coming from her son's mouth. Catherine froze mid-sentence. She turned slowly to look at Daniel, her heart hammering. Did you just... Daniel's mouth was open, his eyes wide, his hand at his throat. He looked shocked and terrified and amazed. And then he made the sound again. Louder, more deliberate. Oh, my God, Catherine breathed. Daniel, are you? She couldn't finish the sentence. 8 years. 8 years of absolute silence, broken by these rough, impossible sounds. The girl was speaking quickly now. The remedy I gave him, it's called the awakener. My grandmother used it for people whose bodies had forgotten how to work. He didn't have heat stroke, Mrs. Parker. He had heat exhaustion, yes, but after I helped with that, I gave him a remedy because I thought it might help with his voice. That's not possible, Catherine said, but her voice lacked conviction, because Daniel was making sounds, right in front of her eyes. Daniel reached for his tablet with shaking hands, finally managed to type. She's telling the truth. The medicine worked. I can feel my voice waking up. Catherine stared at the words, at her son, at the impossible thing happening before her eyes. Cancel the ambulance, she said quietly, but don't call the police yet. I need to understand what's happening. She turned to the girl. Tell me everything. The girl explained, about her grandmother Grace, about traditional remedies passed down through generations, about how some things can't be measured by machines. As she talked, Daniel kept making sounds, testing his voice, growing braver with each attempt. And Catherine found herself believing something she'd never thought possible. Then Daniel stood up, using the tree for support. His whole body was trembling. Daniel, sit down, Catherine said. You need to rest. But Daniel wasn't listening. He was staring at the girl, who was standing between security guards, looking small and scared. One of the guards reached for her arm. Come with me, miss. No, Daniel tried to say, but it came out as just a rough sound. Frustration flashed across his face. The guard started walking the girl away, and panic rose in Daniel's chest. This girl had given him hope, had given him a real chance. And now they were taking her away, and he'd never see her again. He'd spent 8 years letting other people speak for him. 8 years of silence while the world made decisions for him, without him. But the girl had given him a choice, and he was choosing to use it now. Daniel drew in the deepest breath of his life. He felt the remedy working through him, that buzzing sensation in his throat. The pathways were open. Ready? He pushed. Not from his lungs, but from deeper, from his heart. From 8 years of silence and loneliness and desperate need to be heard. The sound that came out was raw and broken, but it was a word. Mom. Everyone froze. Catherine's hand flew to her mouth. Daniel tried again, pushing harder. Mom. The second time was clearer, still rough, but unmistakably a word. The word she'd been waiting 8 years to hear. Catherine made a sound, half sob, half gasp. Her legs gave out, and she dropped to her knees, tears already streaming down her face. Oh my God! Daniel, did you just... Daniel wasn't finished. He turned toward the girl. Stay, he said. The word came out rough but clear. Then, gathering all his courage, please stay. The garden went completely silent. The girl's face crumpled. Tears spilled down her cheeks. You did it, she whispered. You really did it. Catherine crawled across the grass to her son. Say it again. Please. Daniel looked at his mother. Mom, I'm okay. The medicine worked. Catherine pulled him into her arms, sobbing. I can hear you. I can hear your voice. Let me tell you what happened next, because this is where the real story begins. Catherine Parker didn't call the police. She didn't send Lily away. Instead, she did something she'd never done before in her life. She listened. They went inside, all three of them, sat in Catherine's office, and for the first time in 8 years, she really heard her son, not through typed words on a screen, through his actual voice, rough and uncertain but real. And she listened to Lily, this 11-year-old girl who carried ancient knowledge in a canvas bag, who'd been living on the streets, who'd slipped through a gap in a fence and changed everything. You're not going back out there, Catherine said finally. Not tonight. Not until we figure something out. Lily was wary. Mrs. Parker, I don't need charity. It's not charity, Catherine interrupted. It's doing what should have been done long ago. Making sure a child has what every child deserves. Safety, stability, a chance. It took 3 weeks to navigate the legal system, to get Catherine approved as an emergency foster parent, to give Lily a real home. Those 3 weeks changed all of them. Daniel's voice got stronger every day. Still rough sometimes, still tired easily, but growing, learning, becoming. He made up for 8 years of silence by talking constantly. And what he talked about most was how lonely he'd been, how invisible he'd felt, how his mother had tried to fix him instead of listening to him. Catherine heard him, really heard him, and it broke her heart and healed it at the same time. She'd spent 8 years throwing money at the problem, hiring experts, scheduling appointments, managing his condition like a business problem that needed solving. But she'd never just sat with him, never asked what he felt, never listened to what he couldn't say. I'm sorry, she told him one night, tears streaming down her face. I was so focused on fixing you that I forgot to see you. You're seeing me now, Daniel said simply. That's what matters. Lily taught them both about listening, about seeing, about understanding that people aren't problems to solve. She also taught them about healing. Catherine was skeptical at first. Traditional medicine? Remedies made from plants? It seemed too simple, too ancient, too impossible. But Daniel was proof it worked. And Catherine was nothing if not logical. The evidence was literally speaking to her. She started researching, started learning, started understanding that maybe modern medicine didn't have all the answers. With Lily's help, she founded the Grace Project, named after Lily's grandmother. Its mission, to preserve traditional healing knowledge, to study it, to make it accessible to people who needed it. Lily's street medicine became something bigger, something legitimate, but it stayed true to Grace's teachings. Knowledge passed down through generations, now being used to help hundreds of people. The story got out eventually. Despite their best efforts, Journalists started calling, wanting to know about the billionaire's son, who'd suddenly started speaking after 8 years. Catherine did one interview, carefully controlled. She talked about the importance of listening to children, about how sometimes solutions come from unexpected places, about how traditional and modern medicine could work together. She didn't mention Lily by name, protected her privacy, but she made it clear that the breakthrough had come from someone who understood things the expensive specialists had missed. The interview went viral. Catherine's phone rang off the hook. Other parents whose children had selective mutism, researchers interested in traditional medicine. Everyone wanted more of the story. But the real story wasn't about the medicine. It was about 3 people who'd each been voiceless in their own way, finding their voices together. Daniel, silenced by his body. Lily, silenced by circumstance. Catherine, silenced by the deafening noise of her own ambitions. 3 people from completely different worlds, brought together by a gap in a fence. I want you to understand something important. This story isn't about a miracle cure. It's not about magic medicine or impossible healing. It's about being seen. Daniel's voice had been locked away, not because his vocal cords didn't work, but because trauma and stress and loneliness had shut something down inside him. His body had learned to be silent, and it forgot how to speak. The remedy didn't create his voice. It reminded his body what it could do. It opened pathways that had been closed. It woke up systems that had gone dormant. But the real medicine? That was Lily seeing him, really seeing him, not as a problem to fix or a patient to treat, just as Daniel, a lonely boy who needed a friend. 3 months later, I want you to see where they are now. Daniel goes to a regular school now. He has friends. He still sees a speech therapist sometimes, but mostly his voice is just his voice. He uses it to tell jokes, ask questions, argue with his mother about bedtime. Normal kid things. Beautiful, ordinary, precious things. Lily lives with them. She has her own room, her own space. She goes to school too, catching up on years of miseducation. But she still makes her grandmother's remedies, still helps people through the Grace Project. And Catherine? She works less now, comes home for dinner, actually listens when her children talk. Both of them. Because she thinks of Lily as her daughter now. Not officially adopted yet, but in all the ways that matter. They're family, not the traditional kind. The real kind. The kind you build when people see each other and choose to stay. The gap in the fence has been sealed, but Catherine had a gate installed there instead. In case anyone else needs to come through, she'd said. Because sometimes the most powerful transformations come from the most unexpected places. Sometimes the help you need slips through a crack you didn't know existed. Sometimes the voice you've been searching for has been waiting all along, not in hospitals or laboratories, but in the simple act of being truly seen. Daniel sits under his willow tree sometimes, Lily beside him, both of them talking about everything and nothing. And Catherine watches from her window, listening to the sound of her son's voice mixed with Lily's laughter. And she thinks about how she almost missed this, how she almost sent Lily away, how she almost lost everything because she was so focused on fixing instead of listening. But she didn't, because Daniel found his voice, and he used it to ask for what he needed. Please stay, he'd said. His first real words, his first real choice. And they did. All 3 of them stayed. Together. That's the real miracle of this story. Not the medicine, though that was extraordinary. Not the voice, though that was beautiful. The miracle was that 3 lonely people found each other. And in finding each other, they found themselves. So, if you're struggling with something that doctors can't explain, if you're feeling voiceless or invisible or alone, if you've tried everything and nothing has worked, remember Daniel and Lily and Catherine. Remember that sometimes the answer comes from the most unexpected place. Remember that being truly seen, truly heard, truly valued, that's healing too. And remember that there are gaps in every fence. Sometimes the most important thing we can do is leave them open, just in case someone needs to come through, just in case that someone is exactly who we've been waiting for. That's the end of the story. But really, it's just the beginning.